They think you suck as a person, and that if they had their way, they'd cut your throat, put you out of your misery, and relieve the human race of having to deal with an ingrate like you.
I'm going to throw you into the corner, which is what they called a room that was at the end of the hall. They would sit you in a chair facing the corner of the room, and you would sit in that room until you're ready to participate. It could be days, it could be months. Until you're ready to follow their rules, you would sit and face a corner in a room. Sometimes tied up if you weren't sitting still. They would cuff you to the chair. You goddamn pussy! The offender, the person who got physical, would be put into the center of the ring with boxing gloves on, while another student, such as a student like myself who had gotten to a higher level, would beat the shit out of him. And if the kid tried to run out of the ring, the students were encouraged to push him back in. And I witnessed 4 of these, maybe 5, where a 13-year-old kid would be being beaten by an 18-year-old with boxing gloves as all the students yelled and chanted, "Fuck you, you're a piece of shit." They encouraged us to do that kind of screaming while this went on. Jiu-jitsu. There you go. J-E. I don't even want to say it. I don't even like the letter W anymore that it's associated with those fucks. I was watching Inglourious Bastards the other day. I go, no wonder. And why would Brad Pitt fight for the Jews? He's such a, what do they call that, a non-Jew?
A Gentile.
A Gentile. Clamor. So Clamor, this is a fake guy. Let's ban him.
Ooh, can I ban him? Because I hate seeing
He's out of here. He's out of here. Guys, really we got a lot of any person that we ban. I want to let you know. These aren't real Redbar listeners. They're
there's
Gino
a new
Biscon.
rule called heads only.
Wait. You don't say anything, George.
Okay.
Because
zip.
I learned something about some of our trolls that is going to really disturb you. People go, why would anyone hate Redbar? It's pretty good. And I'm with you. I learned something. At first, I thought all of our trolls got to be guys that I've dissed so hard. I mean, think about all the guys I run through on this show. Like thousands of men per month get ran through on the show. So, yeah, they've got a bone to pick with me. But then one was exposed the other day. And I couldn't even believe it. And I'm so stupid that I didn't even think about this. Some of you may have heard Mike's boarding school story. Have you heard that tape? Let me hear you if you've heard that tape.
Many times.
Mike's boarding school story. Many of you are in the dark about what this is, but for those of you who do know, and we'll save the story for another time for those of you who need to be reintroduced to it, but when I was in that boarding school, and I say boarding school loosely, it was not a boarding school. People who know this story know what I was in.
A torture place.
Hold on.
Ooh.
Remember, for those of you who remember the story, you remember that when I got there, I saw what was going on, and I decided to play ball and shoot to the top. Remember that part of the story? Remember the part of the boarding school story where I was taken away to a place in the middle of the woods in Maine? I woke up in my bed. I was 16 years old. I woke up in my bed to 2 giant men. They grabbed me. They put me in a van, and they drove me to the woods in Maine. This really happened to me. And I got there, and the first thing this man said to me was, "You're going to be here for 2.5 years, whether you like it or not." Now, again, this story might be way over your heads if you're just listening. You're like, what? Many people would have freaked the fuck out in that situation, but I saw what was going on there, and I said, play ball. Get the fuck out of here. And I did play ball there, and I was put in a place with a lot of psychos, a lot of bad men. And I remember the other day it came to me. I had a guy who they forced me to reprimand. He was a red-headed kid. He had the most evil aura to him out of any person I've ever met. And I just remembered this yesterday. It was an old memory that came back to me. And I remember I was in that place in the woods in Maine, and I was in a position where this place made me reprimand this red-headed kid who was, I'm not kidding, Satan. He was Satan. And I had to reprimand him. I mean, this was the idea of the school. They didn't have a staff. They made the kids, like Lord of the Flies, reprimand the other kids. And in order to get the fuck out of there, you had to play by those rules, and you were brainwashed into becoming the enforcer. And I'll never forget. Well, I did forget, but it came to me the other day. This kid that I reprimanded, that I had to always reprimand, looked me in the eye and he said, I will make sure you pay for this. Every day of my waking life, I will make sure you pay. And I completely forgot about that because so much other stuff happened. And then the other day, it came to me. He didn't forget. And the kids, those psycho kids that I had to reprimand daily, those hundreds of kids that were under me, that were there because they were truly insane, they didn't forget. But I forgot that those kids, just like I forgot about that whole experience and moved on because I'm not crazy, they didn't. And I discovered the other day, and this was a blind spot, that there are dozens of kids from that school that didn't forget about me. And when they told me I would pay, they meant it. And they're back. I had no idea. I thought that was a kid's memory. It was gone. They did not forget about me. So when you see a bad faith actor in the chat, remember who they could be. Remember the type of men that are after a guy like me. And remember the sick people that vowed that they wouldn't forget me. They're back, and they're back with a vengeance. Have you seen Critters 4? Whoa! Every night I go to bed and I go, God, please keep them away. Please keep the thousands of psychos away from me. And he does. He protects me. He protects me, dear Lord. I just remembered I've got about 3,500. You know, Freddy Krueger was born, and people forget this. This isn't funny. I'm about to fucking cry.
I'm sorry.
Freddy Krueger. Do you know Freddy Krueger's origin story?
Yes.
A woman was working at a mental institution, and she was gangbanged by 1,000 psychos. This is true. Freddy Krueger was the result of a woman that was fucked by 1,000 sick, psychotic men. And this woman was raped at a mental institute by 1,000 criminals and had a baby. That baby was Freddy Krueger. Think about that. When you see a guy in the chat and he says something and you go, what? You think about Freddy Krueger's mother getting pile-drived, cummed in by so many psychos that we don't know who the father was. But we know it was a mix. We know it was a mix of all the sperm of all the bad men on this planet. So we feel for Freddy when we pull out and we look, how was Freddy born? He's not just there to be mean. Freddy is the result of 1,000 bad men. In that moment, and 3 nights ago, I realized I have a huge blind spot. And they were the kids of the Elan Boarding School who I was forced to reprimand. They did not forget. They are back. All right, we're watching Joe Rogan. This is a great episode. It's Annie Lederman. It's Joe Rogan. It's going to be a field day. All right, we must transition. But yes, I will not remove someone from our chat unless he is one of the 1,000 maniacs that made Freddy Krueger possible. Do you catch my drift? So when you see someone poof, believe me, there is a reason. There is a fear. And one day you will read the news that Michael David has been murdered. And you will remember this talk. I will not survive this show. That is 100% the fact. You will, within 10 years' time, watch a video of my death. And I have made peace with this. And this will 100% happen. And if you don't believe that, then maybe go subscribe to Compound Media. Because this show is well, we're going to save that for another time. For now, Annie Lederman, everybody. Can we please give me my Calypso? Come on, smile through it. We're gonna live. We're gonna live for a couple more weeks. Don't you worry. We're gonna live. We're gonna outlast all of them. Welcome to Redbar. Don't worry. It's just fan fiction. Okay, we're just trying to be funny. It's all a joke. Man. I'm telling you. You think Slender Man is scary. Let's see what happens here. Yeah, man, forget all of this. Forget what you just saw. Come on, that's funny, right? Come on, imagine watching this. This has been your weekly cry for help. Ha ha, all is great. The Calypso lightens the mood. Mike lives. How can you hate Redbar? Exactly. So remember this the next time you see something troubling. This isn't funny anymore. Okay? Dearly departed, and mark my sin, mother sleep. What did they say? If I die before I wake, I pray the Lord
my soul to take.
Ashley Butterfield, please put me in a nice safe place for eternity while I rest.
I feel like when you die, Ashley Butterfield is going to be the one to give me the news.
He died, mate. And then it's a YouTube link, you know, in the chat. He died, mate. Check the link. Someone says I'm sweating. This is deadly serious. Tell no one of what you've seen here today. Tell no one.
You should do an updated version of the boarding school story, but like way more spooky. The other one is,
I gotta get out. I'm telling you, I was sent to a place with 1,000 maniacs. I'm not kidding.
I know. We know.
Everyone there was like my parents were tricked into sending me there by some like crazy money guy. Okay. So what was happening was I went to high school and I went there and I said, this sucks. And every day I didn't go. So the high school kicked me out and I wasn't going to graduate high school. Okay. Cause I wasn't going to school and my parents were like, what the fuck are you going to do? And these people came to them. We don't know who these people were. They came to them and said, you have to do something or your son's never going to get a high school diploma. He's a punk rocker. He won't go to school. What are you going to do? You have to send him to this place. And then they sent me to this place in the woods because they thought it was their only hope. I was 16 already. 2 more years, I would have been done. And then what? I would have been nothing. So they said, we got to try something. We got to try this place. And this was before the internet, right? They didn't know anything about this place. And I went to this place. This place was reserved for the world's most crazy people. I was a fish out of water at this place. I was scared out of my mind every day for 1.5 years. Every single person there, I just remembered, wants me dead.
This is what I mean. Like half the listeners of this show are too new to know the
You got to read Mike's boarding school story.
But it's gone now, so you got to do a new updated version.
I do.
I think we should do it.
And this was, I hate to say boarding school. This was a cult. Look it up. Look up Elan School. Go on your own time. Anyone who goes, Mike's talking shit, Google this tonight and try sleeping. Elan, E-L-A-N School. Do some reading. Watch the videos. You will freak the fuck out.
Because the last version that you recorded too was too much of a joke because you're a big comedy guy back then. So
no, it wasn't. When's the last time you listened to that? When's the last time you listened to that? That's not true. Everybody listened to it. They loved it.
Of course, I loved it. We all loved it.
But you don't even remember it. I don't even remember it. I was 10 years old when I recorded it.
I listened to it like 5 times.
What, should I retell the goddamn most terrible, tragic story of my life every 5 years?
Yes. It's a part of you.
I am the only one who came out of that school that hasn't killed somebody.
You're the only one who came out of that school.
It wasn't a school. We got to stop calling it a school. There was no learning. I went to a high school that had 0 learning. Please look that up.
Yeah, watch the Last Stop documentary, which we are too scared to watch.
I'm getting scared now. I can't believe this is actually my life. I'm telling you, I'm sitting at home like you going, I'm a normal guy. How could this be possible? How could this be possible that I was tied into this? So I'm having these nightmares now. And I'm going, wait a minute. I was there with 1,000 maniacs. They didn't forget me. This can't be real. This couldn't have happened to me. I'm normal. Oh, I'm starting to freak out. Mike has villain origins, but came out nice, they're saying. Redbar, beware adult horror. Michael is upon us.
Michael is upon us. It is time to seek refuge.
Where the fuck am I?
The Elan program was twofold. In one sense, there were therapeutic groups.
Your feelings, your negative attitudes are broken down, dissected, torn apart.
The other side of Elan was a functional, working microcosm of the work world.
It was very Lord of the Flies.
That's the best part. The inmates run the asylum.
At Elan, the first thing they learn is you're not going to get out of here.
You succeed and survive if you accept the program. If you don't, there are punishments.
I'm gonna hurt anybody they want me to.
Even the most minor infraction provokes a torrent of castigation, insults, and public humiliation.
General fucking meeting!
We had to be dealt with swiftly and forcefully.
They stomped the shit out of you.
If you want to act like a baby, you should be treated like a baby.
Attack therapy is basically the idea that we need to attack you and break you entirely in order to rebuild you as a good person.
Okay. Let's get back to Andy Lederman. That was all a joke. But water, please, please. God damn it. Here's what I'm saying. And let this be inspirational to everyone out there. As crazy as I come across on this show, some of you know that I live a very regular life, okay? You've seen my snaps. You've seen my cookouts. You hear my story. You've seen what I've gone through. I don't blame society. I don't sit around here and hold myself back I moved on. I was able to forgive and forget. So the next time you hear some girl go, my boobs were grabbed. My boobs were grabbed. I'm never the same. I wish my little tits were grabbed. Okay? The next time someone says, this guy treated me like shit, he was mansplaining. I wish a man only explained something to me to make my life bad. I've been to the darkest, scariest, most hellish places on this earth and survived it all. There is no excuse to play victim in this world. So take that. Take that, all you whiners. And just know that it doesn't matter what you go through. You can come out and go, ha, 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 ho, 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 he. It's a lie. When they play victim, it's a lie. Take it from me, a man who's been, well, it's up to you.
Todd Detter says, what is this, a therapy session?
I didn't want it to be a therapy session, all cheese. I guess I'll just go wear my leopard print thing and smoke my hookah. So I hope it's TJ Nillsen. I've only read the name. I haven't heard it. I don't want to be one of those people that disrespect names. He is working on a documentary called The Last Stop. It's a documentary about the boarding school I went to called Elan that you might have heard about in the Mike's Boarding School story episode. And if you haven't heard that yet, it's available at redbarradio.net/store. The only reason it's up there right now, instead of just for free on the feed, is because, well, we need ways to support the show around here. We're commercial free. And it's 7 hours. It's a 7-hour story, which is part of the reason why I'm really excited to have TJ on the show today. Because he's doing what all of us who went to this crooked school always hoped someone would do. And that's to make a documentary and show everybody what the hell went on in this place. Because prior to me going there, and still now, I never knew or thought a place like this could exist. A place scarier than jail. A place scarier than any boarding school you think you've seen in a movie or you've heard about. So we'll fill you in. When he gets on the phone, we'll fill you in on, or he's going to be on Skype here, which will be nice. But we'll fill you in on everything that happened, shortened version, of course. But I'll play you the teaser. I guess we could start. I could play the teaser before he jumps on the line. He'll be here in like 10 minutes. Even earlier. He's probably listening right now. He's probably ready to go. I don't know. I'm ready to go. But it should be pretty neat. I'm excited. I haven't talked to anybody from this boarding school really since I left. We'll get into that too. But I find most of the people who went there to be adult freaks now that I can't relate to. But I've talked with TJ. He seems pretty normal. And I'm excited. You know, I've kind of ignored this documentary that he's been putting together. I've heard ramblings about it over the last year. But I kind of ignored it until I saw this teaser here. Because God knows it could just be some terrible thing. But looks like he kind of knows what he's doing. So let me play you the teaser, and you can see. If you're listening to the audio version, today would be a good day to check out the video version of the show if you're listening to the podcast in the future. And you can do that by going to youtube.com/Redbar Radio. You can see all our video versions. That way you can see this trailer. Or you can look it up on YouTube. It's called The Last Stop teaser. So I'll play it for you right now. And let's just make sure we're good. Okay, here it is.
We don't bullshit kids. We don't tell kids that this is some kind of utopia, that everything is going to work out for you, that when you leave here, everything's going to be roses. We don't tell them that out there is a nice place either, because it's not.
2015. Sweet. So we're going to get TJ on the phone in just minutes here. And those screams you were hearing in the teaser there, that's actual audio from the school. And we'll tell you why there's so many screams at this school. You know, why is this a school filled with so many screams? Oh, here's YouTube doing its autoplay thing now that it does, so it could get more click money. You know, YouTube needs to find a way to, here's a tangent before our big interview. YouTube needs to find a way to let you turn off the autoplay. I mean, I get it. They want more plays for click money, but it's very annoying, especially when you're running a talk show. All right, I'm going to fire up Skype here and see if TJ is ready. I know it is early, so it might be rude to interrupt him. He might be fixing his hair. I know if somebody... TJ.
Hey.
Hey, a little early. Are you ready to go?
Yeah, I am. It's funny because I'm listening to your show, and obviously it's off here, so I'm going to...
Yeah, there's like a 45-second delay.
Okay, cool.
Sweet. I can put you on the screen, though. You ready?
I'm ready to go.
Awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, TJ Nillsen, the director of The Last Stop, the upcoming documentary about the Elan School. Did I pronounce your name right? The last name?
Yeah, you got it. Nillsen.
Nillsen. Sweet.
Yeah.
Well, I got to applaud you, man, because you're finally doing the thing that we've all wanted to see since we got out of the Elan School, and that's a documentary. So I applaud you for putting in the work and actually... more so putting yourself in the place, like none of us want to dig through all that again and go through it again. You know, people always ask me to tell the story. And before I did on the show, I always said, do you got a week? Do you have a week? Because
yeah, right.
It's going to take, you know, there's so much to it. And it's so emotional that every time you sit down to tell it, you know, it's a 2-hour discussion, and it's almost like you've popped MDMA the way you start feeling about it. You know, you're getting all sincere. Right. And it's not something we want to go through over and over again. So to put together a documentary, not only hard to do, you know, technically, just, you know, to throw together a documentary is hard, but to relive it and to have to go through all that muck again. Just something none of us want to do. So that's awesome that you're taking a stab at it. So very cool.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So let's fill people in, I guess, on what the hell this school is. When did you go? What year?
Well, I was there from 2005 to 2007, a little later than when a lot of the, you know, a little more controversial things happened. But
so you went after 9/11.
After 9/11. Well,
wow.
Yeah, after 9/11, right, yeah.
Holy. How old are you?
Yeah. I'm 27.
Okay, I'm 32, and I don't remember what year. I never remember the years, but I was 16 and a half when I got sent there.
Right, I think you mentioned 1999, right?
It could be. Does that sound right? I'm 32. I was 16 and a half. I can't do that kind of math in my head these days.
I'm just judging from what you've told me before, what I've seen you post, you know, around the boards.
But, wow, so I can't wait to ask you because to be there during something like 9/11, I remember when 9/11 happened, I'm like, holy shit, there's people in Elan. You know, are they getting to see this stuff? Do they know what's happening? I mean, these are big things. And to be locked away in this type of school during that kind of stuff just blows my mind. But
I was there with a kid. I remember his name was Marcos, and I think his father was a firefighter during 9/11. One of the ones that actually got stuck, you know, in that situation. And I remember he used to talk about it. It was pretty crazy.
The situation. Yeah. So, okay, well, let's tell people. How do we begin to tell people what this school is without going into a 3-hour story? I mean, do you have an easy way to wrap this up in a nice little paragraph?
Well, I think that the technical term for Elan is a behavioral modification facility. It wasn't a treatment center. It wasn't a you know, a boot camp or a rehab center. It's a new thing. It's called behavioral modification. And the idea is to change the way that your behavior works. Do you know what I mean? The general idea is to break you down and break down the way that you already think when you get there and the values that you have when you get there, and then kind of put back into it, you know, it's what the diploma says, put back into it the, you know, the productive aspects that a person in society should have.
Sure. So just to let people know, this is how it happened to me. I was 16 and a half.
I was awokened one morning at around 5 a.m. In Chicago, Illinois, in the area there. And I was awoken by two giant men that I had never met before standing over my bed in my parents' home when I was 16. And these men started explaining to me that I'm being taken away to a boarding school, in which I burst out crying out of shock and started screaming until I noticed that my parents were standing in the hallway peeking into my room also crying, while these two men about to grab me were explaining we need to get dressed, get out of bed, and come with them. Now, imagine what you would do being 16 and being awoken to that.
I was brought there the same way.
Okay, so you were.
Yeah.
And, I mean, begging and pleading and shouting as they dragged me out to a van, you know, and that kind of shock and trauma, I mean, you can't even interpret that as a 16-year-old kid.
Right.
So I was brought into a van and driven to Poland Springs, Maine, in a van with two men. One sat in back with me so that I couldn't do anything, and the other sat in front, and literally my mind could not interpret what was going on. They handed me a note from my parents trying to explain what was happening. But the whole van ride there, I was lied to by the men, telling me that, oh, no, this is just a program to go to for a couple of months. And once you do, we'll send you back home. Everything's going to be good. It's fun. You go to concerts. You're going to go whitewater rafting. It's going to be great. We show up in Maine, however many days later. I honestly don't remember. We show up in Maine, and I'm immediately thrown into a room with three other kids and an adult, and they've got me in a chair, and they're telling me that I'm going to be here for 2.5 years. And I'm just shaking I'm in shock still, and I'm saying, get my parents on the phone immediately. You know, this is insane. The guys in the car told me to, and I couldn't, make sense of any of it. And they said, oh, no, you don't get to talk to your parents for at least another month. I mean, and to put that on a 16-year-old kid, I mean, I'm almost about to cry again because you just can't do that to a young mind like that. You can't. And people they're going, weren't you mad at your parents? Of course, at first, but they were swindled into this. They were manipulated into sending me here. People go, why were you sent there? That's another long story. But most of it, the bulk of it was I wasn't going to school. I didn't care for school. I was skipping, and my parents were scared. They thought that sending me to a place like this was the only way I'd graduate from high school. And that's what they desperately wanted to do before my 18th birthday. So you said your story was similar to that.
It was similar to that. I mean, the reasoning of why I was sent there was a little different. It was, for me, it was more my home life was a little dysfunctional. Do you know what I mean? And my parents, they were great parents. My parents were really good parents, but they weren't good parental figures, I guess you could say. You know what I mean? My dad was dad's always, I think he's listening now, and I kind of feel bad saying this, but my dad was always kind of a pushover, and my mom was just kind of an emotional wreck. So I wasn't, I guess, really being taught to be kind of like a good kid. I was out all the time. I was doing a lot of drugs, and I wasn't home. School, I really wasn't doing well in school either. So the agreement was that if I got kicked out of the school I was going to at the time, which was a regular boarding school, then I would be sent to Elan. And lo and behold, I did get kicked out. And
so they warned you.
Yep.
They warned you in advance.
Well, my mom warned me. I didn't really take it seriously. I didn't even really know what Elan was. She had told me about it. She was like, yeah, it's a school in Maine. It's great. All the kids, it's this great community, and they run it. And I'm like, whatever. I'm not going to go anyway, even if I get kicked out of school. So whatever.
I had no idea that this was even a possibility in my parents' minds. They had never discussed anything like this. Of course, if they would, I would have run away from home if they would have brought anything like this up. Right. And I would have went to live with one of my adult friends in the city. But so that's why they had to keep it a secret. But I was so shocked because my parents weren't strict like that. You know, they would yell at me and they would parent me and they would ground me and they would do these things, but I never thought they were the type of people to send me away. Right. Never. And when they did, it was just complete shock. But let's get into what happens at this school. Let's go over some of the bullet points. Stuff like there's no interaction with your life at home. You're now in a bubble. There's no talking to your old friends. Your friends don't know where you've gone. At least in my case, my parents weren't allowed to tell my friends where I went. That's what the school told them to say. Right. You know, and my parents they didn't know any better. They took cues from the school. They were at their last straw there. So my friends didn't know where I was. I wasn't allowed to communicate with my parents until about a month, maybe a month and a half in. And this wasn't an educational school. This wasn't you're going away to a school like you see in the movies where everyone's wearing a sweater vest and just going to classes and it's like a college campus. This was a very weird cult-like community. I mean, you were taken away from the outside world and reprogrammed into a new world in the middle of the woods in dilapidated cabins. And the other strange thing, there were very few staff members. They used a system where the kids turned into the staff members. They had this dichotomy, they called it, of jobs that you would work your way up to. And each time you got to a new level, you would receive more privileges. So you were pressured into working through these levels to get more privileges, such as what were some of the privileges you would get from going along with their rules? They would let you listen to music. They would let you work out. Yeah, just simple. I mean, they stripped you of everything. You weren't allowed to put product in your hair if that was your thing. Yeah. You had to shave. You could not wear T-shirts with logos on them. They did what's called stripping your image so that you couldn't.
You know, I think you bring up the most important part of people, you know, for people to know about Elan is that it was entirely run by the kids. And even the staff members that were there were mostly former residents. And most of the staff members, the majority of them, did not have formal psychiatric training or training on how to deal with kids.
Let's talk about this, too. The cost of sending your kid to Elan, to a cabin in the woods that was paid off in the 1970s, and a place that's run by the students. You know, the students doing the cooking, the students doing all the cleaning, the students doing the counseling for the other kids. I was at a level where I was giving tours to new parents thinking of sending their kids there. That's how brainwashed I had become. What was the cost? Do you know the average cost to send your kid there? Not state-sponsored, but what the parents were paying. What is that number?
When I was there, it was $54,000 a year.
$54,000 a year. And
that is more than a Harvard education.
Wow. Is that true?
Yes, that is true.
That's insane.
At that time, when I was there in 2005, that was more than a Harvard education.
So what I'm interested now in my adult life is where was that money going? It wasn't going. That building was paid off. The campus was paid off. It couldn't take much to run the electricity. I mean, it was just basic lighting, right? I mean,
right. Well, yeah. I mean, where the money was going. I mean, you know, it's a good question because there really wasn't that many staff there. And I don't know. I mean, the place, they had a lot of property. They did. It was a big place, and the person who owned it was also running a horse track called Scarborough Downs.
Scarborough. So who's the person who owns it? Let's talk about him.
It was Sharon Terry. Now she owned it after Joe Ritchie died.
Sharon Terry, and that was Joe Ritchie's wife?
That was Joe Ritchie's, yeah.
And who's Joe Ritchie? Let's talk about him real quick.
Okay, so Joe Ritchie was he grew up from what I know about his history, he grew up in Brooklyn, or it might have been the Bronx, but it was either Brooklyn or the Bronx. And he got into some trouble and was sent to a program that a lot of people might know called Daytop.
What is it called? Say that again.
Daytop.
Daytop.
Daytop Village, yeah.
Okay.
It's big here. It's big in New York and on the East Coast. they're still active, and they have a lot of little facilities where I'm from in Long Island and here in New York City. But so Daytop, and if you look up Daytop and look how the program works, it's the exact same thing as Elan. Expediters, department heads, it's the exact same thing. Okay, so, and the encounter groups and all that, and we'll get into that.
Yeah.
But so Joe Ritchie graduated from Daytop, and then he started working for the program. And he realized that, well, I want to go and make my own program. Do you know what I mean? And I want to kind of alter what they do here and do it my own way, because this industry that was coming about was making a lot of money.
Sure.
Okay, this dealing with troubled kids. This was a new thing, dealing with troubled kids. Now, in the beginning, it was mostly drug addicts. It was, heroin addicts and all that. They were going to Daytop, and he said, okay, we're going to make this place where we can, deal with these heroin addicts up in Maine. I'm going to run it myself. He met a guy named Gerald Davidson, which is a Harvard-educated psychologist.
Wow.
So this is where the medical license comes in. So they got together, and then they went up to Maine, and they started the first Elan in Sebago. So what happened was, eventually, after treating, heroin addicts for, 4 or 5 years or whatever, they realized that, okay, maybe we could take this intense form of therapy that is kind of, I guess, somewhat working for heroin addicts, and we could use it to treat everything. Do you know what I mean?
Sure, yeah.
And we can make a ton of money doing it. You know what I mean? We can get kids that runaways, we can get criminals, we can get, pedophiles, murderers, anybody that has a problem, we could try to help them and maybe try to change it and make a lot of money doing it. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So that's how it kind of grew, was that it wasn't just about drugs anymore. It wasn't just about treating addiction. It was about kind of treating everything. One size fits all. You know what I mean?
So they, when did they open up Elan? When did they buy this property in the middle of the woods? I mean, for those of you who want to paint a picture in your mind, when you're pulling up to the place, you're going down long, wooded, desolate roads into the center of a very wooded area. I mean, people ask me all the time, why wouldn't you just try to run away? You couldn't. There was nowhere to run. You could try, but you'd be in the middle of the woods. And it's not like being in the middle of the woods in like a suburban area outside of a city. It's like being in the middle of nowhere. So there was really nowhere to go. And most of the year is freezing cold. You're not, you don't have access to a winter coat that you could just easily grab and take off. And if you did, here's the scary part. If you did even try to step out the door, you'd be tackled by the other students. Now, people go, why? How do they get the other students to do that? Why would how do they brainwash these kids into working for the school? And that's one of the most troubling aspects, I think, of the school in itself. And that's what I think everybody needs to hear about, is the fact that people can be brainwashed into almost anything if taken away from society. That Going Clear documentary about Scientology, which you just watched last week, I watched myself on HBO. So many parallels to what it's like to be in Elan. You think, how could anybody fall for Scientology? Well, it's that same idea. You strip people from the society they're used to, and that peer pressure becomes their new reality. And these new ideas become their new reality very quickly. When I was in Elan, it only took a few months for me to really convince myself that this was the right thing to do and to get on board. And it took me a while to unbrainwash myself. I don't know, how was it for you? When you went there, how long did it take before, or did you never buy into what they were doing?
No, I've actually bought into it pretty quickly, and I actually turned 18 when, like a month or 2 months after I got there. So I actually could have left.
Wow.
Now I know this was for people that went there back in the 70s and back in the 80s. This was not on the table. Do you know what I mean? And I need to account for them too, because it did change. But
and that's an important part. Sorry to interrupt you, but it's really important to know that there's no like years or classes in this school. When I went, people were coming and going every other day. So it kind of worked like that. There wasn't the beginning of a school year. There wasn't the end of a school year. It was a constant program. And it was 12-year-olds to 18-year-olds to 20-year-olds, some people that would stay. So you were mixed. And now, you know, I was 16 and a half. I turned 17 very shortly after I was there. And I was sitting at tables with 13-year-old kids doing the same work that 13-year-old kids are doing. And yeah, when you're 18, you're allowed to leave. And I actually stayed quite a bit after my 18th birthday until I realized what was actually going on. And I tried to leave. They wouldn't let me leave. They convinced my parents if he leaves now, he'll never amount to anything. This will destroy his life. I had gotten to the final level where they say if you get to the final level, you could leave. I did that within about a year and a half. I got to the end. I was done. And I said, you know, can I get some graduation dates? You know, let's wrap this thing up. I'm ready, you know. And they said, no, you got to be here another year and a half or so. And I said, why? Why? What am I to do? I'm to give tours to new parents? That's what you want to work for your school? To have my parents send you another $54,000 for a kid that needs to get on with his life and go to college like the rest of his friends? It's time to put me back into society. And when I saw that they wouldn't let me leave and how they turned on me, when I wanted to get graduation dates and argued with them that, you know, it's time for me to go, they shot me down is what they call it. They put me back to level 1.
Right. Well, 0. That would be level 0.
Yeah, level 0.
Level 1 is worker. Level low worker is shot down.
Forgive me. Yeah, I forget all the technical stuff, but I'm sure it'll start coming back to me the more we talk. And then they poisoned my reputation within the school. You know, they wanted to put me back into this system and get me troubled again, you know. So I took off. And the minute I did, after the, you know, almost 2 years of dedication I put into that school and helping all the other kids and giving the tours, they had a whole assembly about me and how I was a fraud and a poison to the school and how no one is to speak my name ever again. And anyone who speaks my name or brings me up will be shot down as well or put into the corner. How is this any way to treat people? And we're going to get into the abuses and what goes on there. Let's just cover the bullet points, though, because there is a lot to talk about. And we could be here again for a week if we wanted to. Let's talk about what's an encounter group. Tell people about that, because that's what really seems to shock people.
Right. Well, the encounter group was also developed, you know, back in the day. It was nothing at Elan was invented by Joe Ritchie and the guy who created Elan. That's what they taught us there, was that Joe Ritchie created this place and, you know, it was his place. Nothing was from him. It all came from, you know, other sources.
So Joe Ritchie is the David Miscavige of Elan. And
or the Madonna of therapy. Just taking things from, yeah. You know?
Okay, so go on.
But yeah, so the encounter group was a way to basically vent your feelings to another person who made you feel a certain way. And there was a box in front of every house, and you know, because during the day you could not verbalize how you felt towards somebody. You couldn't yell at them or tell them, you know, I hate you or fuck you or whatever. You could not do that, or you would have gotten in trouble.
People go, how do you put 100 troubled youths under one roof and expect them not to all kill each other? You weren't allowed to say fuck off to someone. If you did, you'd be thrown into a room and locked up.
Yeah,
literally.
You'd be dealt with.
Sure,
you get in trouble. You get in trouble.
You couldn't do any of that. So almost, what was it? It was almost every day, right? Kinda with the yelling.
Oh yeah. Well, I think for us it was like 2 or 3 times out of the week we had.
2 or 3 times a week, you would have to go into a room with about 12 other people, sit in a circle, and scream at them. You would have to choose someone to scream at, and you had to do this week 1. I remember getting into this school, and they take me into this room. They say, okay, you got to scream at people. And I said, absolutely not. And they said, well, if you don't scream at them, we're going to throw you into the corner, which is what they called a room that was at the end of the hall. They would sit you in a chair facing the corner of the room, and you would sit in that room until you're ready to participate. It could be days, it could be months. Until you're ready to follow their rules, you would sit and face a corner in a room, sometimes tied up. If you weren't sitting still, they would cuff you to the chair. And I'm sure it changed. Like I said, we've all gone in different years. We had different staff members come through, different students. So it could have been different, a little different for everybody, but these same core things happened to all of us. Now, do you want me to play the audio here that you sent me?
Yeah, go ahead, play the audio. So I mean, I think
set this up for us.
It. So this audio track was actually a recording that somebody snuck in with a tape recorder, an ex-resident visited and snuck in with a tape recorder and recorded an actual encounter group. And what you're about to hear is what getting your feelings off was called.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm sorry the Skype's minimized. So this is what you had to do 2 or 3 times a week. This is the sounds from one of these encounter groups.
Goddamn high crack that fucking teeth back there. You will respect me. No further respect this stupid ass. Little pussy ass bitch. But if we go back to cheap. Go motherfucker. Go return that position. You fucking suck. But if you don't fucking worry me. We don't do shit. We don't close the goddamn belly book.
That's not an exaggerated one. That's a fairly standard. And what's so weird is you got this tape. It's exactly the same tone and sound as it was when I was there. That's the style everyone used of screaming. They convinced you to scream at people in this way, and we did it. We all had to. We had to buy into it, and we found ourselves screaming like this 2 to 3 times a week, sometimes more, constantly. Even if you didn't have anything to scream about, you had to find something to scream about. And this was called getting your feelings off, right?
Right, yeah, it was called getting, and it's funny you bring that up because you had to participate in encounter groups and you had to find something to be angry about. So if you weren't mad, you kind of had to be mad and you kind of had to get your feelings off. Or the second half of the group, they would confront people and you would be confronted, why aren't you getting your feelings off?
And and that's what the school was. It was a constant day in and day out, being confronted, yelling at people, scrubbing floors, doing tasks that really led to nowhere. I mean, I was doing some jobs where I had to stay up 48 hours at a time writing names in a book in the smallest font possible over and over and over again. None of this was necessary. Very little education. I'm not sure when you were there. They had once a week, maybe, something called classroom where they sent you.
Yeah, we had schools like 4 hours a night. But you're in classes with. I was in class with like a 13-year-old kid.
You're not, I mean, literally the schoolwork they had you do was second grade level stuff.
Right.
So that they could send report cards home to the parents saying, you're getting straight A's. Look what we've done. You had a kid that was failing out of high school. He's getting straight A's now. Yeah, it's because once a week I had to do a coloring book. And if I put in the effort, they gave me an A+. They would send home that. And why wouldn't my parents want to keep me there? I was going to graduate high school with a 4.0. Right. So no education, no real education. I certainly don't have the high school education that my friends got. It was a constant confrontation and working on yourself. And in ways that young kids, it's too traumatic, too much, too intense. Let's talk about The Ring. People want to. I'm just covering the scariest stuff because this is kind of a shortened version of the whole school, and it's the most important part of it. Let's talk about The Ring. What's The Ring?
Right. Well, they weren't using The Ring when I was there. That was gone. But I do have a lot of people talking about it.
Okay, it was not gone when I was there.
So then you might want to. You could probably explain it better.
The Ring was. If somebody was being physical, physical as in, let's say they pushed somebody else or punched somebody else, which, by the way, rarely happened. That's how under control and brainwashed they had gotten us. 100 kids, you never saw anybody fight, usually, at least when I was there. Very rarely. But if somebody did get physical with another student, one of the consequences they could receive was called entering the ring. And this is where the entire school assembles in the large assembly room that they called, what did they call that?
The dining room.
The dining room is where everybody would assemble for meetings and such. They would assemble all the students, and all the students would form a circle. They would move all the chairs and tables out of the room and form a giant circle. And then the kid who was the offender, the person who got physical, would be put into the center of the ring with boxing gloves on, while another student, such as a student like myself who had gotten to a higher level, would beat the shit out of him. And if the kid tried to run out of the ring, the students were encouraged to push him back in. And I witnessed 4 of these, maybe 5, where a 13-year-old kid would be being beaten by an 18-year-old with boxing gloves as all the students yelled and chanted, "Fuck you, you're a piece of shit." They encouraged us to do that kind of screaming while this went on, while the staff members sat there and watched. And this was your consequence if you got physical. Now imagine what that would do to a 13-year-old kid. That kid's never going to be the same. That kind of trauma with 200 people chanting "fuck you" as you're being beaten in front of them. And these kids would, I know there's boxing gloves, but get punched in the face with a boxing glove. It hurts.
I know you couldn't win. There was no winning.
Oh yeah, the kid, you couldn't win. If you started winning, they would help you to lose. Other people would get involved. So it was never, you couldn't get in the boxing room and then defeat them and become champion of the school or anything like that and take over. Right. You were taken down. And that goes for day to day. If any kid tried to get out of line, there was a whistle blown, a literal whistle, and students who were in the position to do so would tackle the kid and restrain the kid. The staff members never really got involved in the restraining. It was always the students. And to have students who had only been there for 8 months like myself be put in the position to be teaching and restraining kids is sick. It's sick and it's not right. And the parents were kept out of this. You weren't allowed to, when we finally were allowed to get on the phone with our parents, you couldn't mention this stuff. They were monitoring the calls. You sat with somebody who monitored, and if you did, they would hang up the call immediately. You couldn't tell your parents they're hitting me, they're making me yell. That was called negativity. If you brought that up, you would get in trouble. I don't know, again, was it like that for you? Were you allowed to tell your parents what was going on while you were there?
You couldn't really tell your parents, and even if you did, you had monitored phone calls as a non-strength. I don't know if people know what the difference between non-strength and strength.
When I told my story, I used some of their terms loosely, but we're not familiar with the terms over here.
Okay, so a non-strength is somebody who's new or who is in a lower position who can't take responsibility for themselves.
That was the label, a non-strength. Was your label, okay.
And then a strength was expediter and above. That was, they trusted you more and that you had more responsibility and they felt that you could watch yourself. Do you know what I mean? And that goes into the little things they would take away from you. As a non-strength, you couldn't go to the bathroom alone.
No.
You couldn't even talk to another non-strength without a strength listening to your conversation.
Exactly. Imagine this. Every shit you took was in an open stall with another kid monitoring your shits. You had to wipe in front of another man every day. There was no shitting alone. They saw your dicks. They saw your butts. They saw your boobs. There was 2 showers for 80 men that they had to share. If you didn't have shower shoes, you got athlete's foot. If you got athlete's foot, you got athlete's foot and your foot rotted away. They weren't treating. They wouldn't give you medication. Medication was taken away. I remember I had a severe heartburn problem when I was there, and they refused to give me the medication for it. They said, no, that's all in your head. That'll go away. And it was little things like that people just don't believe. There were girls there. If you were even caught eyeing a girl in any kind of sexual way, you were the consequences were extreme. You'd be put in front of the whole school, not similar to a ring, but without the fighting. You'd be put in front of the school while each kid had to step up one by one and scream at you in front of the whole school.
Right. And you know I don't. When you were there, did they have signs when you were there?
Signs?
Signs.
Yeah, we had the movie Signs. I think was out by then. It was pretty good.
No. The signs were. Do you remember learning experiences?
LEs, learning experiences were. Fill us in on what that is, because I'm very fuzzy with these things.
A learning experience is basically a punishment. That's basically what it was. And they had different forms of punishment. One of them were signs. And these weren't something that were used when I was there. And they were probably taken away shortly before you got there. Because I do know some kids that were there in the 90s and they had signs. Okay, so signs, it was a big piece of poster board, you know, pretty. I mean, if you remember the poster board we had there, it was pretty big.
Yeah.
And you would wear it around your neck and it would point out the issue you had. You know,
I think
and
we did that. Yeah, I think we did that. Yeah, that sounds familiar.
So, you know, if a girl flirted with a guy or whatever, it would say, please ask me why I'm a whore, or please ask me why I compromise my values and choose to, you know, give them to someone else or something like that.
Sure.
And I've heard some pretty degrading signs. You know, if they're doing the documentary, one is, you know, I'm a coward. Please ask me why my future is getting raped in prison, or, you know, please I don't take this program seriously. Please confront me before I end up dead. You know.
Sure. Yeah.
So you had to walk around with this sign all day. And people had to come up to you and ask you about your sign, you know.
Sure. Yeah, that was one of the many things. And like I said, it took me 7 hours to tell the initial story with all these little details. So, you know, we could go on and on. There were the food was awful. You know, prison food, cafeteria food, hospital food. The kids had to make the food and serve the food. You ate what they served you and when they served it to you. If you didn't like fish sandwiches, you were fucked that day. You know, there weren't substitutions, at least for me. They used soda as something to motivate kids. I remember this. They had a soda cabinet, and if you did something extremely good, you were rewarded with 1 can of warm soda. I mean, that was about what we were That was what we were lured to work for. Soda cans.
Right.
Those were our prizes, and somehow we got so convinced that soda was just the most amazing thing in the world, and we would really go out of our way and work an entire week to get a can of soda. Right. So they took everything away from you, and I bring up the soda thing is because that's how much they took away from you, that a can of soda would motivate you to follow these insane rules that they had put on you.
And the expediters got little pizzas on the weekends.
Yeah, they had these little tiny, disgusting microwaved pizzas that they would give the kids if you did extra good. It was very hard to earn these things, though. They weren't giving them away.
Little pack of candy for everybody else. I remember we got that
pack of candy. That's what a great thing to give to kids. But I'm just trying to think of the bullet points because there's so much going through my head right now, thinking back to it. Right. What were some of the most troubling things to you? I guess I'll ask you. You're putting together this documentary. What's your focus on here with the whole project?
Right. The focus of the documentary is basically I've interviewed people that have gone there from the 70s all the way up until when I was there, you know, in 2011, and that's kind of when it clicked. 2007, and then it closed pretty much shortly after I left. And the documentary strings along these stories and basically, you know, explains, you know, why people were sent there, what it was like there, and then what happened for them after they left.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? So, and you know, I have some people that have had good experiences there, and this is why I think Elan makes a good story, is because there are people that have had good experience. Well, I don't want to say good, but maybe more enlightening experiences there. And learned.
Oh, you don't have to worry about that. The Elan story is 100% a great story, and everybody that I've mentioned it to is captivated by it immediately, almost immediately.
Right.
I've sold thousands of copies of the story that I've posted, and people just want to hear more. We've been begging for a documentary or a movie to be made, and I hope that yours gained some traction and people see. So, you know, another thing that got me excited, I saw you're actually shooting on a legit camera. You're shooting on the new Blackmagic camera. Is that?
Yeah, the cinema camera, right?
Yeah. So that thing looks pretty good. Which I think we need here. You know, I'm really concerned that if this documentary is not well done, it's going to discredit, you know, because a lot of the people who went there needed to be somewhere. Right. They didn't need to be in Elan, but there were a lot of kids that were very bad that went there.
And you know, I think if I were to sum up my opinion on Elan, because I learned some things there about myself, and I'd say I didn't have a good experience there, but I learned a lot there.
Sure,
and,
yeah, same
you know,
here.
I managed to take something from it, but the problem that I saw with Elan is they were taking kids who just should not have been there at all.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean? It was just the idea that one size fits all therapy.
A lot of the
will
kids,
help anybody.
A lot of kids there were from abused homes. They were state-sponsored kids or kids that were too young to go to jail, mixed in with people like me who just needed a kick in the ass, you know, to get back in school. You know, I was not an insane person. Now, I remember there was a psychiatric review that I guess I went through. My parents had told me, this was about a year before, my parents had told me that this was to get me into the bad kids class in my high school. Okay. And so I didn't know this was about Elan, but there was in our high school, the high school I went to before Elan, there was a class where if you were a bad kid, you got put in this class with other bad kids and you didn't have to really do any homework. And it was a way to kind of keep you away from the kids who are trying to study. And it was easy. And all my friends were in it. But you had to have an evaluation to get in this class. So I faked, you know, being crazy to a counselor to try to get in this class. He would ask me questions and I would give him what I thought he wanted to know to get me into this class. Unbeknownst to me, that's what got me thrown into Elan. Which I tried to argue with when I was there, and of course they don't believe you, you know. So I had to tell them my whole story. You know, once you get to Elan, you have to write what's called a guilt letter. Mm-hmm. Okay, you have to write a letter to your parents admitting everything you've ever done bad, and you have to keep rewriting that letter until your parents give it the thumbs up. So you would write a draft, a bullshit draft at first. You'd be like, "Well, I didn't go to school, and I stayed out late." You'd send it to your parents. Your parents would say, no, that's not all the bad stuff he did. And then you'd have to write another one. And I had to do this about 6 times until it was approved by my parents in the school that I was admitting to all the bad things I've done. And they do this so that the school has a legit record of all the bad things you've done so they could work on it. Now, all my bad stuff was basically the same stuff I'm doing today. Pranks. You know, throwing sodas off the second story at the mall onto, you know, piercing pagoda. I don't do those things anymore, but they were the stuff you see in the show Jackass, stuff like that. And the school made me feel like a criminal for those things. I remember they spent 2 hours confronting me in front of the whole school about a soda that I threw at somebody, you know, as a prank, you know, and sure, that's not what a kid should be doing. Fine. You could argue that, but, do you need to be locked away for it? You know, that's the question. Should you be thrown in with a mixture of, you know, 13 to 20-year-old people that some are insane, some are legally insane, you know, some are harmful, some are biters. You know, there were kids who would bite other kids until they bled. They had kids that would come and piss on other kids. We had a child molester kid in our midst. You know, we all had to sleep in what's called dorms, and each dorm had 3 bunk beds from World War II. You slept on plastic mattresses that were about a couple inches thick on top of springs, literally bunk beds from World War II. Some of them had bullet shells attached to the top. And you were 6 to 8 to a room. And the older kids, the kids who were there for a longer time, got to sleep on the bottom bunks, and the newer kids had to sleep on the top bunks. And one night, a student was caught quietly pulling the blanket off another kid and jacking his little peepee off. And it turns out he had done this to about 20 kids throughout the night, quietly. And when I found out about this, I demanded he be expelled from the school and sent somewhere else. This was not a person that I could live with. and they treated it as if it was the same thing as him stealing a soda from another kid. Right. Which I found very bizarre. It was one of the things that led me to believe that I could not be there any longer. I did not want to be molested by a 14-year-old crazy kid. So a lot of that kind of stuff going on. And, you weren't allowed to have sex with girls there, or I don't know if you were allowed to masturbate. Everybody did. I had to learn to do what I call the slow jack, which is, I've talked about this. The slow jack is where you're on a top bunk on springs, okay? Just moving your arm up creates, a trampoline effect on these bunk beds, and the kids know you're diddling yourself. So I created this method where you just touch yourself ever so slowly for about a good hour until something creeps out of you. And it was just one of the few pleasures that you were allowed to, I guess, have in your own privacy, but I don't think everybody did it, and to have those kids pent up and dealing with everything they're dealing with, it's just a recipe for disaster. You want to put that part? Could that part get into the doc? The slow jack? We were forced to slow jack. Go on. Sorry, I cut you off.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No.
It's funny because I have somebody talking about that. A woman actually is. The only good times at Elan is when you got in a room by yourself and you could pleasure yourself.
Yeah, that was a big deal.
That was the one drug I guess you could have.
And you would find yourself really falling in love with some dogs because of how you weren't allowed. At least when I was there was no TV. There was no access to the outside world. No newspapers. No internet. Internet didn't exist when I went there, the way it is now, at least. So there was none of that. The computers they had were old Apple IIe machines where you did maybe a little bit of Mavis Beacon teaches typing once in a while. But there was none of that. I didn't know what was going on in the outside world at all. No idea. How was it when you were there? Did they have computers there? Did anybody have a smartphone?
No. We probably had the same computers you guys used back in 1999.
Yeah.
It was the clear Apple computers.
I remember loading up a floppy disk, a 5.5-inch floppy disk. Those were surely out of date then.
No, but you could not have phones. That's absolutely not. There was you could not have a cell phone or anything. I think some kids had. I remember they had the PSP, the little PlayStation.
Yeah, see, that's
thing.
insane. That was definitely not allowed. There was nothing. I mean, we were able to get Discmans at a certain point.
Well, when you got to a certain point, you could have it. You could, keep it. But then some kid went on the internet with one, and they took them away.
Wow. Yeah, there was no internet to be found back then, so that wasn't even an issue. Smartphones hadn't been invented when I went. But they let you have a Discman eventually, or a boombox, but they only let you have edited music, and it had to be music that was approved. I remember my parents finally were able to send me my CD book, and they went through it, and they pulled all the CDs that they didn't think I should have. Eminem was in his heyday. This is right as the Marshall Mathers LP was released. I'll never forget this. And many of the kids getting sent there were huge Eminem fans, and they had to hold an assembly with Eminem propaganda, saying how horrible he was and how evil he was. And this was a common thing. I mean, it was that whole year, it was constantly, Eminem is so terrible. You couldn't even mention his name at the school. That's how strict they were about the stuff you were listening to and such.
And what house were you in?
I was in, so there were 3 houses, and it's confusing because when I was there was Elan 3, Elan 5, and Elan 7, I believe. Does that sound?
8. Probably Elan
8. Okay. And where were the others? So back in the day, there was Elan 1, Elan 2, Elan 3, Elan 4.
Oh, yeah, there were up to 6 houses.
Okay.
I mean, there was the Sebago house, which somebody burnt down because, he couldn't take it anymore. They burnt down the house. There was a house in Waterford. There was a house in Parsonsfield. And then there was, I want to say 4 houses actually in Poland Spring.
Okay.
And those were all operating at one time. Elan was huge back in the day.
Wow.
Back in the 80s, 70s, it was an empire. It was giant. Then when you got there, that's when it was slowly dwindling down. When I got there, Elan 3 and Elan 8 were the only houses. Elan 5 or 7, the numbers I get mixed up with, but that was closed.
And which one did you go to?
Elan 8.
Okay, so we were in different worlds, kind of.
Right.
Elan 8. I had never stepped into that building.
Members.
Some of the same staff members and definitely the same program, but a total different group of kids in each house. You were completely separated from the houses. I had never stepped into the other houses. I didn't know what they looked like. Elan 3, the one I was in, was the biggest. So when we would have a full school assembly, the other houses would come to our house to do the rings and the big general assemblies that they would hold when they wanted to talk to everybody all at once. Now, there were no freedoms. I mean, you didn't. Eventually, you got to see the outside world. Once a week, you were able to go outside, and you had to go outside once a week, even if it was, 10 below zero. You would have to bundle up and stay outside for 2 hours. But most of it was walking around a circle in the parking lot. I mean, that's what they had you do because they had to. But
they had basketball and stuff. We had little games during the weekends and stuff like that. Yeah.
But most of the year, it's freezing cold there in Maine, and the house was so poorly built that they had us in that they had to put plastic over every window most of the year to keep the heat in. They didn't have central heat or central air. They had radiators that ran through the floor boards there. And most of the year, they had to put this plastic on the window to hold in the heat. And this plastic was like a foggy, so you couldn't even see through the window most of the year. Literally.
That's something that sticks out to me most about Elan is I see a lot of other rehab facilities and whatnot. Well, I can't really compare it to rehab facility, but I see a lot of other facilities and, they look like kind of like public schools and whatnot. I mean, this place was literally kind of equivalent to a rundown camp.
This looked like a very inexpensive overnight camp that you would send your kids to in the 70s.
Even worse. I mean, the tiles were ripped up. I mean, it was. Walls
they did not invest in anything new. There was never, we're putting in new drywall, we're putting in new window. It was none of that. So, that's what kind of concerned me about where's the money going? $54,000 a head. And even if these kids were sent there by the state was paying that fee, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
To Elan. And the money was not used to better the kids. That's the problem. The money was, that amount of money with how many staff members do you think were there in total on the payroll?
Well, when I was there, I want to say there was like six.
6 staff members for how many kids?
Close to 200, 150 when I was there.
That's a lot of money divided up. And by the way, how come all the staff members drove really shabby cars? Were they encouraged to drive beaters so that we couldn't see where that money was going? I mean,
it's funny. I'm friends with one of the staff members there. She still has the same car that she was there with. And from what I know, from what I've gathered, when I was there, the staff, from what I've heard from them, they weren't really being paid that much money.
Okay.
I don't know how much it costs to live in Maine. It probably doesn't cost that much, but they weren't being really paid that much money. And some of the better staff that I know,
So you could say maybe some of the staff members were swindled in the same way, thinking this was a good place and a good thing to do for kids.
I don't want to jump and say that. I believe that some of the staff members had very good intentions. Now, I can't speak for the kids back in the 70s. I have what's in my documentary, but I think what really has to be understood here is Elan back in the day and Elan when we were there were kind of very different. The program was the same, but it was different because I talked to staff members back then in the 70s. These were kids that had just graduated the program, gone into reentry. They graduated the programs. They stayed and worked there. They were getting paid up to $40,000 a year.
Okay,
you know what I mean?
That's not good. Bad for a kid out of high school in the 70s.
Yeah, that's really good money for like a 17 and 18-year-old kid who just that's awesome.
Yeah.
In the 70s, that's a lot of money.
So was that another way to sway the kids into finishing the program and believing in it and making them stay in this bubble?
I think so. Well, to a degree, yeah, because I know Joe Ritchie would buy cars for his the staff members that stayed. He'd buy them houses. Do you know what I mean?
Wow.
And he would set them up.
There was one time the people who got to my level, which was one of the higher levels there, I forgot what the highest one was. Not reentry. I'd never made it to reentry, but what do they call the end level there?
It's coordinator.
Coordinator. Yeah. Okay, I was coordinator of the X's. which was like the hardest one, right? Is it when you were there? Was that the hardest one?
The X's, yeah. Well, that was a security force. So,
okay.
Yeah, I mean, you had to be pretty trusted to be a coordinator of the X's.
So that's the position I was at. And I remember one of the benefits of being in that position was we had to go do Joe Ritchie's gardening on one of his mansions.
Right.
I think it was Joe Ritchie. Yeah.
He was still alive when you were there.
Okay.
So maybe
we went to his mansion, which looked like a place somebody from the slave days would have, with columns and a giant swimming pool. It was a plantation.
Right.
And we had to do his gardening, and that was just to get out of the house to do gardening for free. So the kids were doing free labor on this man's house. Let's not forget that. And he was okay with this. Our treat was, at the end of the gardening, we got to take a 30-minute lap in his pool. That was the treat. Me and 3 other students, and I'll never forget how eerie his house was and how massive and plantation-like it was. You know, it had that furniture that a king would have. You know, the gold-framed oil paintings all over the walls and sculptures.
He was a bizarre, because I've heard stories from guys. He would walk around Elan in giant fur coats and gold chains and a fedora. You know what I mean? And he was kind of the man on campus. He was the god.
Now, what about the state? Where was the state of Maine in the local government? Where were they for this? You know, because I never saw them come and do a stroll through and say everything's on the up and up.
Well, they have. They did. And the problem with the state of Maine, and this is kind of what led to Elan's demise, and I don't know if you want to get into that now.
Yeah. I would like to quickly cover what's happening now and what happened. Right.
Okay, so Maine, their policy on investigating schools and facilities is that they give the school a warning before they come. You know, we're going to come and look around. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So whenever they had those investigations, you could imagine what happens. Everybody, you know, just sit here, don't do anything, no screaming, take off the signs, you know, no rings. You know,
had to
just
do
everybody sit here, and if you say anything bad about this program, you're going to get it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And the same thing when parents came for tours.
Yes.
You know, there would be parents who wanted to see the school. And like I said, they'd have students give the tours, such as myself. I gave about 8 to 10 tours. Yep. And what better way to sell the school than to have a student give the tour? You know, they're hearing it from my mouth, and there was no gun to my back. But yeah, when the parents would come, I do believe that it was a much nicer version that day of all the goings-ons. They definitely didn't do the screaming while the parents were there. They showed kids. They probably, the parents would come during our free time hour where we're allowed to draw or write or stuff like that, where we're all kind of just chilling out in that dining room, to make it look as friendly as possible. Because obviously, I don't think many parents would send their kids if they saw what actually went on.
Right.
So,
and that's the same way with the investigations. You know what I mean? When Maine did investigate.
Okay. Yeah. See, I don't remember that ever happening while I was there.
Right. And now Illinois had done some investigations back in the day, and they did find a lot wrong with the school and actually pulled a couple of kids out. And Elan sued them and won.
Elan also tried to sue my parents.
I'm not surprised.
When I left when I was 18, I had left right after my parents had paid for another full year, which I didn't know. I didn't know the back end of what was going on, And my parents wanted that money back. I'm gone. How about you you could prorate it, whatever, give it back. They refused. And this is where my parents kind of started listening to me about what was going on. They didn't want to believe me at first, even when I got back home. They didn't want to believe what I was saying. Elan had contacted them many times after I left and told them, do not take him home. This is another important part of my story, at least. When I left when I was 18, I left with a bus ticket to Boston and the clothes on my back. That was it, and a $10 bill. That's what they gave me. I had to fight to get my state ID back from them. You can't just go out into the middle of Boston with no state ID. They had convinced my parents to not let me come back home, even though I was 18 and I had gotten to the end of the thing and I was a great guy. I wanted to go to college. They had told them, whatever you do, Just trust us. Say no. And I spent 2 weeks, a week and a half, 2 weeks homeless in Boston until I was able to remember a friend's phone number, dial them up on a payphone, and get them to save up $75 for a bus ticket for me to come back to Chicago, in which I still couldn't, my parents wouldn't let me home. The school was still in talk with them saying, please, you got to send him back. I'm telling you, he is not ready. This could be life-threatening for him.
Right.
You know, they used, life and death to make them say no and put me back into the school. And I refused, and I was living with friends for weeks, and I had not graduated high school yet. And I had to contact, there was a woman at the school who I thought I could trust, and I was able to get into contact with her and thank her. I forget her name, but she just wrote me a diploma. She said, I understand what you're going through. You're a smart kid. I'm going to fix this for you, because I couldn't go back to high school. I was 18, and that was all done. They weren't going to let me back in. I wanted a college degree. So she just wrote me a diploma and mailed it to me.
Right.
And my school that I went to, Illinois matched your diploma from this program for some reason.
Right.
And they gave me a diploma from my high school with a 4.0, which is a sham. That's a lie. That's fraud. That's a sham diploma. I never went to one high school class, and I have a 4.0 diploma from Stevenson High School in Illinois. So after I got that diploma, though, I was able to convince my parents that I was good. And when Elan refused to give back that money, and my parents saw my side of things. And everything kind of went back to normal after that. I went to college afterwards. I graduated college, and then I started doing this, and life's fine. I mean, you could argue that I'm still a bad person, but Elan wouldn't have, that's not, Elan, being there for another year wouldn't have changed who I am as a person now. I'm the same person I was before I went there. I learned a lot from it. I almost say I'm glad I went, but I don't know because I don't know how much trauma that I haven't dealt with from that experience.
Right.
The nightmares are still there. Do you have the nightmares still? Were you there?
You know what? I did have, I had them for a while, and they're always the same. You're back there, you're stuck, and you can't get out. That's
and
I've
nightmare.
Noticed that for everybody.
Everybody has the same nightmare. I used to have them all the time, and now it's every once in a while, and now they've kind of merged with regular school somehow. Right. But every dream is, I'm 18, I want to leave, they're not letting me leave, and I somehow find a way to try to leave, and it's really bad. But every time I'm there, it's... hey, I'm 32. I have a radio show. I'm fine. Get me the fuck out of here. And they won't let me leave. And I would say that that's trauma. That's trauma that hasn't been dealt with. And God knows how else it's affecting me. But I do think that it did make me also very strong. To go through what that was and come out of it okay is a big jump ahead of everybody else, I believe. When
I think that goes for a lot of things, even the military and just anything where you're put in a situation of such an intense, of feeling and whatever, you're going to come out a stronger person. And I think that's what happened with me as well, and most of the other kids that went there. The problem is that there were two parts of the program. Like I said before, there was the breaking down and the building back up. And some kids never experienced that building back up.
Never, and nor were they prepared to. You take a 13-year-old kid from an abused family with no dad or whatever and send him there, he doesn't get it. Luckily I was old enough and smart enough and not insane, and I was able to get it, and I said, you know what? At first, how they got me going was I said, all right, I'm going to do everything they say by the book because I want out.
Right.
I want out of here as soon as possible. So once I realized that there was no changing their minds, I did everything they asked for and more. I was the ideal Elan student. Like I said, I got to the end within a year.
Yeah.
Which had not been done,
Did you say you turned 18 when you were there?
I turned 18 when I was there, and I was staying.
Yeah.
I was staying.
And they gave the kids who turned 18, they gave a lot of favor to. They did.
Yeah, well, because, they didn't want you to leave, and they wanted you, more importantly, to be an example for the other kids.
Exactly.
So, I didn't leave. I didn't leave till, I think it was 4 to 6 months after my 18th birthday when I finally said, I want to leave. I had talked about leaving, and they had shot me down. And then the other thing, too, which you could hear in the Mike's Boarding School story episode at redbarradio.net/store. And these are not, I'm not trying to shamelessly sell this story, but we don't do ads on this show. And that's a good, just like you're going to sell your documentary, I'm sure.
Right.
We got to get paid for what we do somehow. And that's a good way to do it. And it's certainly worth your $5. It's just $5. But one of the things that happened is I was very close to a female staff member who took me out on drives eventually and hung out with me. And because I was 18, I fell in love with this woman. I fell in love with a staff member there, and she flirted with me. She encouraged it, but it got to a point where I was really in love with her, and I was like, you know how like when you fall in love with somebody, like it consumes you?
Yeah.
That's what happened to me in Elan when I was 18. I fell in love with this woman, or thought I did. You're in this confined space. You're not able to flirt with any girls for 2 years. You're going to fall in love with somebody. Like I said, the ugliest dog started looking pretty, a couple months in. And I fell in love with this woman, and I confessed it to her. And she told everybody. She told all the staff members. She told the head woman of the house. I forgot what her name was. She was an awful, mean woman, the head of the house. And they pulled me in with all the staff members, and they embarrassed me brutally. They said, "What the fuck do you think you're doing? You're in love? You think you're in love with her?"
Right.
And they shot me down, and it was the treatment there, and it was much worse, and I describe it in detail in my story. But it was seeing that said, this is not a good place, because I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't do anything wrong here. I have been an ideal student. I've given tours. I've been a positive role model to all these kids here. I've helped these kids. I've done everything that's been asked and more. And to treat me like a criminal for emotions that every human being has was sickening. And I lost all faith in what they were doing, and I saw the greed, and I saw that this was a great opportunity for them to put me back to 1, or put me back to 0, so that I could be there for another year. They knew I was 18. They knew I was itching to get out of there. They thought, maybe another $54,000 is worth, I don't know. I mean, I'm accusing them of that, certainly.
Right.
I'm accusing them of that. Now, where do you stand on that? Do you think this place is a scheme?
And I'm sure people would very much disagree with me. I don't really think it was a scheme, but I think I think it was mismanaged, and I don't think they really knew how to run the place, and I think to a degree there was a big level of malpractice because
definitely.
Do you know what I mean? And I think in my opinion, I think the program works for the people who are willing to give it a chance, for the people that understand it. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
I understood it. I got it. Okay. It made sense to me. You know what I mean? Confront people. You're not gonna slide under the radar. I got it. But some kids didn't get it.
No, the 14-year-old Puerto Rican kid from the broken home did not get that idea.
Right.
And nor should it be. I mean, to think that we're all capable of this is a miss.
Right. And the thing is that, you need to hold those kids accountable because they didn't get it, and you didn't. And I went to staff one time. There was one time I remember going to staff, and I told them there was a kid there that just seemed like he wasn't mentally capable of, I want to say, most things. And I was like, what is I don't think he should really be here. This kid seems kind of, a little mentally damaged. And they were like, no, it'll work for him. He just needs to be given a chance. This is some kid who I remember he started jerking off in the middle of a class.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was weird. Yeah, and but they didn't kick him out because they were making money off him, and to that degree, that's in my opinion where Elan really went wrong.
Yeah.
Is they were a little greedy.
So
they were greedy.
So let's get to this. Their doors are closed now, correct?
Oh yeah, they're closed.
They're done. So what led to that? How did it get shut down? The thing we'd all been hoping for, imagine being a kid there and it gets shut down while you're there. That was our fantasy. for the school to become shut down while we were there, or for something to happen where we were allowed to leave. I can't imagine the joy of some kid being there and them being told you're going home. You know,
right.
What led to the shutdown?
Well, there were two things. One of them was, Maya Solovitz, who I interviewed, she is a journalist about this industry, the troubled teen industry. And she was one of the people when they heard about. Oh, I don't think you mentioned Michael Skakel. Did you mention?
I haven't. Okay. This. If you want to tell that story, we could do that one too today. Because I've never really covered that one. Because I don't really have all the info on that.
Well, that's a big reason the school was dwindled down to nothing.
You want to tell that story?
Yeah. Well, Michael Skakel was a cousin of the Kennedys.
Okay.
And the Skakel family is actually a lot more wealthy than the Kennedy family because they own one of the biggest steel industries, in the United States. They're loaded. So Michael Skakel was sent to Elan back in the 70s. I think it was like 74, and he got sent there for a DUI, something like that. Arguing with the police officer at a DUI. Now it turned out before Michael Skakel was sent there was a murder on his property of a young girl that he was very, kind of had some romantic relationship with. Her name was Martha Moxley. You can look this up.
Martha Moxley. This is all out there right now. This is not an opinion. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is real.
No, there's a movie on it. There's a documentary on it. It's called Murder in Greenwich. This girl was murdered on his property, and they still don't know who did it. And Michael Skakel, it turned out when he was at Elan, they said, they accused him of being the murderer. And now you know how Elan works. If they want you to admit something, you're going to admit it.
You're going to admit it. They're going to force you.
They're going to put you in the ring. They're going to put you in the corner. They're going to give you a general meeting, and it's going to happen again and again and again until you admit what they want you to admit. You know what I mean? So eventually he said, well, I might have done it.
Okay.
And this was a very big part in his indictment on being accused of the murder of Martha Moxley.
Was he? Did he murder her? Or we don't know.
Still up in the air. Actually, he was just released from prison because apparently his lawyer was not doing a good enough job representing him.
But Elan didn't go to the authorities when he said he might have murdered her, right?
I don't know about the details about that because they had his brother. They thought his brother did it. His brother was Tommy. I think it was like Tommy Skakel or something like that. They thought his brother did it, but then it started to come out that maybe Michael did it. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And then the confession came from Elan, and it was like, this changes everything. And he wasn't cleared. He's going to have another trial eventually because they still don't know who did it.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
So how did that lead to problems for Elan?
Okay, what happened is that now Elan was in the newspapers because of all this.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
Michael Skakel attended strange school. He was beaten into submission. Blah blah blah. All of the papers started covering it. And a woman named Maya Solovitz picked up in the newspaper about the school and found out that it was still open. Like I said, Maya Solovitz is a big name in the troubled teen industry. And your viewers should probably know this industry goes way beyond Elan.
Sure.
It's a lot bigger, So she found out about it, and she's a very reputable person, and she contacted the New York Department of Education, who was paying for kids to be sent to Elan. Okay, they were paying for it, and they said, you need to do an investigation of the school because things aren't right there.
Yeah.
Now, how New York works, New York doesn't give a warning about going in and investigating. New York just walks right the hell in there and says, we want to see what's going on.
Okay.
They walked in, and
what year was this? What year did they walk in?
This was about 2008. I want to say 2008. This is when I left.
Okay.
When I left, Elan 8 shut down, and they moved everyone to Elan 3.
Okay.
Okay.
So it's getting smaller and smaller, and a lot of people say as the internet grew, parents, you Google Elan School, all you see is horror stories.
And that was another big thing. There was a big campaign. There was if you look up, the first thing that comes up is Elan Record of Atrocities. A group of people got together and they organized this movement and this website and got it out there, got it on Google. And when parents searched for a place to send their kids, because now we're in the internet age, this is the first thing that comes up.
So they bust in, and I want to get back to that point, but they bust in 2008, and what do they see?
Well, they see kids restraining kids. They see, people sitting in corners for months. They see things that do not, coincide with the New York's, rules on how to treat children and how to run a facility. So they pulled their kids out, and they pulled funding, and they said they wouldn't support the school anymore. And a lot of kids were sent there from New York.
Yeah.
New York sent a lot of kids.
Sure.
there.
Yeah. It's not far. Yeah.
Yeah. So they cut funding, and then on top of that, with the internet campaign, Elan was doomed. They were doomed.
Yeah. Now I remember, back to the internet stuff, when I first got out there, I wanted to see what was going on, and the internet started getting a little bit more user friendly around then. And I remember there were forums. I found forums, and people who wanted to speak negatively about Elan were banned from these forums. They were kicked out of them. And there wasn't Facebook then, there wasn't Twitter, there wasn't social media. So these stories were very much buried in the internet. But now with social media, you can't stop them. And with Google, you Google Elan, it's a mess. Nobody's going to send. So it dwindled. It started dwindling. And then what happened?
Well, I mean, they just ran out of money. I mean, by the time when I left and when I talked to people there, not by the time I left, but by 2010, 2011, there were 20 kids there, 10 kids. It just became nothing. You know what I mean? There was nobody there anymore. They couldn't hold the place up.
And when did they officially close the doors, shut down the school, and send home the scraps?
That would be 3 days and 4 years ago.
3 days and 4 years ago.
Yeah, April 1st, 2011.
2011. So it's done, and is there anybody that needs to be held accountable after all these years? Is there anybody out there that made off with a bundle of money that's out there that might need to be reckoned with? Because I don't hear the voices of the people in charge. I don't see them on any of these groups. I don't know. I'm not very active in the Elan community. I've kind of tried to forget about it now and move on. I don't like to sulk in it, but I feel like somebody should be held responsible.
Well, if you ask me, the person that I think should be held responsible, Joe Ritchie's dead, obviously, but the person that I think should be held responsible, if anybody, it would be Sharon Terry, who owned the school.
Okay. Well, you hear this, Sharon, and I'm sure. So when I first did my boarding school story, I believe there was, and I can't even remember it, but there was a threat in the air that if you tell these tales, they're going to come after you. Someone's going to come after you. People have tried, because you think all these years, it's been open since the 70s, no documentaries, no books, no movies, very little in the newspapers about it. How is it being kept so quiet for something that's so insane to most people? Like the people listening now, non-Elan people listening now, this is insane to them. They're filling up with anger. Their blood is boiling hearing stuff like this.
Yeah, and to some degree, and this is something I'm kind of afraid of with the documentary, I don't think people really want to believe it.
They don't want to believe what? I mean? That it was bad?
That this actually happened. That this was a place, even though we have these little, videos that came out back in the 80s and the 70s, there are people out there that don't want to believe it, and I'm afraid that people really won't believe it. I mean, I heard of a story of a kid who went there in the 70s. This is not my, I want to say favorite, but this is probably one of the most demeaning stories I've ever heard. This kid was, he went there in the 70s, maybe the early 80s, and he was one of those kids that kept getting in trouble. You know what I mean? And eventually he was shot down so much, and he wanted to get a dog for the house, like a dog to walk around, because they had house pets. And Joe Ritchie came in and he said, "Okay, you want a dog? Well, you're going to be the house dog."
Wow.
And they dressed him in a dog costume with a leash, and an expediter had to walk him around on a leash, and he had to walk around on all fours, and he had to bark, and he had to eat out of a dog dish and do tricks. And,
this is how the furry movement started.
Yes.
So yeah, there are stories like that, but what do the staff members think of this documentary? Are they telling you? Have you gotten any pushback saying, "Don't do this. This is wrong"?
No, I really have. I mean, the only resistance I've got, it's cool because the community really does support me, and they've been great, and everybody's just been really awesome.
The community of ex-students, you mean?
Yeah, exactly. Everybody's just been really awesome at helping me out and giving me their stories and whatnot. There are a few people there though. There are a few ex-residents who really want this to be. I'm trying to tell more of a balanced story. Not balanced, but I'm trying to.
Well, you have to. In any documentary, you have to these days. Otherwise, they'll flame you for being, having an agenda. So you have to. Right. I mean, even the Scientology documentary that was certainly one-sided showed everything, and that's what I'm trying to do. With my story, I do the same thing. You got to tell everything. You got to be honest about it.
Did you see how Scientology responded to that documentary?
No, I actually didn't dig. We were so busy with other stuff. But yeah, how did they respond to it?
When you get a chance, they have. You know what? I'll send you a link at some point. The Scientologists have their own YouTube channel. They put up these very well-made videos about each person that was interviewed in that documentary, destroying them and destroying their credibility.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
Very well-made videos, too.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, that's what they've been doing ever since. I don't know about you, but I smoke a ton of weed. Right. And I think it's when I say that, I hope that people understand that weed is almost a health supplement at this point. I hope people know that. It's extremely good for you. It leads you, once you get used to how it feels and you stop feeling paranoid from it, it leads you to really explore some deep thoughts, especially laying in bed at night. And I was thinking about, this is certainly a tangent, but what if Scientology is a deliberate hoax to show the world how foolish all religion is? And that's their mission, to shut it all down. Let's create a religion that is so bad, but so similar to every other religion. And if we get shut down, they got to shut them all down. I don't know. Right. That's just what my high think. I don't know why I even told that story here, but and I don't know where to go from there. But
no, it's funny though, because I was watching this and I actually had a conversation with my friend about Scientology and everything, and I was like, and I think I talked to you about this. I'm like, I was watching the documentary about Scientology, and you know what? Scientology isn't really that much different from all the other bullshit religions out there. They all have their bad aspects and everything. It's all crap. So. Hey, look, in my opinion, if some people follow Scientology, it makes them happy, go for it. You know what I mean? Whatever.
That is not my opinion. Great. I used to believe that kind of philosophy somewhat, but my biggest problem, and back to Elan and back to the big picture of things, is when you remove someone from the society, which some might call a bubble in itself, the one that we've built. It's certainly, we're feeding into a lot of bullshit in our normal society, but when you remove us from the only society that's real, the only society that we know, and reprogram us to your own beliefs that have not been verified by the majority of the public, it's bad. It's bad. Anytime you're segregating large sections of society and reprogramming them, it's going to create conflict for the rest of us. We need to all be on the same page as far as if we want things to work in this world. We got to be on the same page. And the more and more we're segregated and put into separate groups with different ideas, so different from the majority, the more trouble it's going to create. We got to get on the same page, not be all in subculture, different pages. And I think, we got to do this with religion. We got to do this with our cultures. We got to do it with everything, or else admit that segregation is the best thing for everybody. But if you want the world to all hold hands like all those cartoons with the kids with the different color faces holding hands around a globe, then we got to be on the same page with everything. And the story has to remain consistent, whatever story that may be.
Right. I think one of the bigger pictures with this documentary, and there are other documentaries coming out about places like Elan, is I don't think we still understand or have figured out a great way to help kids that might need help.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
We tried this with Elan, and we tried this with, there was a lot of other Straight Incorporated and Daytop and everything. And Daytop seems to be doing pretty well, but I don't think we still understand how to make, how to help kids. And, to a degree, do we really need to force kids to change? Because Elan was a very big response to the war on drugs. And we all know how much that fucked up our country.
Sure. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So because at that time it was, we need to fight people that do this.
It was Elan, kids. Many kids who were sent to Elan were just people who used weed.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Many of them. I mean, that's why they were sent there in the past, was they were caught with weed. And they were sent to a place like Elan. We're seeing the same thing all over the country, is how many people are in jail because of weed, which, again, I consider to be a supplement, something helpful to the human race, especially.
And now it's almost legal. So it's just evidence on how much that movement that Nixon did really messed a lot of shit up and messed a lot of people up, because it was, we need to fight drugs instead of maybe just help people that have drug problems. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And back to your point, I think you're not going to convince certain people to act the way you want them. We have to understand that there's billions of people on the planet. Some are just nuts. They're nutty, and you can't rewire them. You can contain them, but you can't rewire everybody. And I understand the desperation in parents and desperation. I don't necessarily trust the state sending them there. That kind of seems like maybe a more of a business than it is to help kids. But I don't know. I watched a lot of kids at Elan never move up, like you said. I watched a lot of kids who got told exactly the same thing I was hearing. They're the same age as me, and they remained scrubbing the floors for 2 years.
There were kids there that, I mean, there were kids there that were sexually molested by their parents. You know what I mean?
Sure.
That came from home environments that I knew absolutely nothing about. And that's funny, because I when I was growing up, I thought my home environment was bad. My parents were getting divorced.
Yeah.
My mom, was crazy and everything. I met some kids that make it look like I was in like daycare.
Exactly. Yeah, there were kids there who. Yeah, the stories about their parents just beating the living shit out of them constantly, raping them. Yeah. There are a lot of terrible human beings out there. I think the answer is probably don't have a kid if you're insane.
Exactly,
Just stop fucking having kids.
And that's the thing, and we're all put into this situation. We all have these different issues, and we're all put into one house, and, we all have to help each other work on these issues, but we don't really know how to work on them, and, it becomes kind of a mess, and
it really was a mess there, and I can't wait to see what your doc brings to the table. And I hope it leads to, I hope this isn't the last doc. I hope it leads to more filmmakers grabbing a camera and going out and doing the digging, because you certainly can't cover it all in an hour and 20 minutes.
No, I can't. And it's been that's the hardest part so far, is to what I need to include and what not to include, and
So what's the storyline? Let's just talk about the doc real quick. What's the storyline? What's it going to be about?
Well, I mean, like I said, we start, we hear about, the kids' past and why they were sent there, what their home life was like, and what problems they were having. Then we go, into their, their first day at the school and what it was like walking in there, and then what it was like for them there, explaining the different rules and the hierarchy. And, then we'll lead into, Elan's, demise and kind of how it worked, and then how people have the aftermath of the whole thing.
And do you have any video footage from Elan? Do you have any of that? Is there any good?
I have some video footage. I had that NBC thing that started to come on after you shut it off, but that has a lot of video in it of what's going on inside, and I have some other video sources that I've got sent.
Are you able to get on the property now and go do a tour of just the area? Are you able to get in there?
I've been able to get some footage. I'm gonna get more. I probably shouldn't really be announcing this on the air, but it's closed, so I'm not going up there. I'm not going to get any video footage.
What about this? Because I'm planning on sharing this with, and hopefully all the people who went to Elan over the years will find this interview and hopefully see your documentary. But before the documentary is in the works still, if anyone has footage or audio, should they send it to you? Do you want that?
Oh, please. Yeah, absolutely. Anything anybody has, it would be great, to get it.
And where can people find you? What's the best way to hook up with you? If you've got footage, if you've got drawings, if you've got photographs, because all that stuff will help, right?
And I have a lot of cool drawings. That's one thing.
Same. That's what I did too. I drew everything. Right. A lot of my stuff was thrown away because I left. I wasn't able to take my stuff, and they threw away a lot of my scrapbooking that I had kind of hid while I was there. I drew pictures of every room. You know, I drew pictures of the general meetings, you know, because you didn't have a camera. You had to remember it somehow. And there was nothing to do. There was
one of the biggest problems with this documentary. There were no cameras, there were no video footage allowed in Elan. You know, it just wasn't allowed, except during graduations. But if anybody has anything, send it to me. You know, you can find me on Facebook, or my email address. I don't know if I should just,
just give it out. You could give it out.
It's TNILSSEN25@gmail.com.
All right. And the teaser can be found on your YouTube page. There's no website yet for the doc?
No, once and by the way, that says 2015 is probably going to actually come out more towards 2016, there's still a lot of work to be done, but there's a lot of work that's been done. Were
people doubting you or something? Because I saw you said, for those of you asking, I've been working on it every day, and then you post the teaser.
I wasn't getting any doubts. It was just I wanted to make sure people knew that I was still working on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, these things take, it's a tremendous amount of effort to put something like this together and to do it right, and then to figure out how to cram it all in. Like, you watch that Scientology doc, and you're like, they really brilliantly put all this information into a 2-hour story, which is really hard to do.
Right. Yeah, that was a very well-made documentary.
Yeah,
it really looked good.
Yeah, that's why I thought you should see it definitely before we talk, because it's kind of the same type of stuff there.
Right. I like that, and like I said, I want to put a lot of work into this because I like you said before, with the camera and everything, I want it to look and I want it to sound very good.
Sure.
I think it deserves that. You know what I mean?
Well, I'm available for any help you need as far as getting awareness and drumming up excitement for it, and I can't wait to see what you come up with here.
Yeah, I should have a trailer coming out this year. I will have a trailer a real trailer coming out this year, so people can look forward to that. And everything has been going along. I've been working on it, and everything's coming along. But it's going to take some time. But I have a lot of confidence in it.
Sweet. Well, we'll definitely have you back when it comes out, because I want to follow up with this. I know our listeners are super interested in the story, and it's a story that you can't really find out there. Yeah. It's a unique
really
one.
Different.
It is a different story, and I hope to see a feature film one day. But it's people like you who are getting the ball rolling. Like I said, I didn't want to do it. I've been people ask me all the time, you got to make a doc. Why don't you, you've got all the resources, make a doc. It's like, I don't want to. That sounds horrible, but you're doing it. Someone needs to do it. And you can check it out. It's called The Last Stop. Check out the teaser.
I'll have a webpage up soon.
Sweet.
Just focusing on the edit right now and making sure everything is able to come together the way I want it to.
Awesome.
So,
Well, please keep in touch and come back if you got anything else you want to share as the process, starts moving along.
We'll do.
Awesome
I really
stuff.
appreciate it, Mike. I appreciate the opportunity.
TJ Nillsen with The Last Stop. Thanks so much, man. Take care.
Thank you.
Peace. Sorry. I had to do something obnoxious. Well, that's about as serious as I could do an interview. Those of you who listen to the show regularly know that I never fucking really do anything like that. But this is a unique story to me, and a story that I think everybody likes. I've only read our chat room a few times, and I saw some really horrible stuff like, wow, Mike's really a bitch, stuff like that. I guess I don't care. I mean, you got to be a bitch sometime in your life, and this is a good opportunity to do it. So I hope you like that. I'm not going to do anything else. That's going to be it for us today. Lots of shows. As you can see, check your podcast feeds. Check the Barmy. Redbar episode, season 13, episode 6 is up on the Barmy right now. You could grab that. And we recorded that yesterday. That's a Barmy only show. And there's tons of shows. Get caught up. Lots of beefs. I'm at war with comedian Eliza Schlesinger right now, defending comedian Ari Shafir. Get on Twitter. I've been doing a ton of stuff on there. At Redbar Radio on Twitter. Help us win the war against fake social justice warrior outrage.